Hi there, I'm Ayala Connell and I'm a paleo and gluten-free chef, and this is an episode of Simply Paleo. Today what we're going to be doing is showing you how to make shepherd's pie. Now shepherd's pie is traditionally a dish from England and Ireland, and it has a lot of historical reference to potatoes. Hold on, up. Let's try that again. Hi, I'm Ayala Connell, and I'm a gluten-free and paleo chef, and this is an episode of Simply Paleo. And it looks like it's recording, so that's good. Today we're going to be making shepherd's pie, as I just said, for those of you that were paying attention before the recording stopped. And shepherd's pie originates from England, the United Kingdom, Ireland. And, you know, in that part of the world, there's a lot of that meat and potato type of cuisine, and in shepherd's pie, of course, is a really thick layering of potato. I come from more Mediterranean Israeli roots, so I did not grow up on shepherd's pie, but as an adult when I tried it, I fell in love with it, just how nourishing it felt and how warm and all the different layering of Okay, well, hopefully this is, let me just check the wireless. I'm sorry for those of you that are trying to watch, but we're just going to make sure that we are on wireless. Here we go. Okay, so for shepherd's pie, today what we're going to do is layer flavors, and we're going to put the different layers in a pie plate, and we're going to bake it. And then all those flavors are going to come together to create a delicious, perfect bite. So what I've done is I started by caramelizing onion. So I have next to me a cast iron pan, and I'm going to show you what I've done so far. I chopped up an onion, and I put it in the cast iron with a little bit of olive oil that had been heated up in the cast iron. And then I added in the onion, and I've been cooking it down, essentially caramelizing it. And it's now officially soft and translucent, and then it's a wonderful olive oil caramelized onion smell in the kitchen here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to actually increase the heat, because I had lowered it a bit, and we're going to put in some ground beef. Now there's a lot of different versions you can use. You can do lean beef, you can add in some lamb or some pork. We get a side of cow every year from a grass-fed cow farm up in Dorset, Vermont. It's called Vermont Natural Beef, and they're wonderful. We've been working with them for over a decade, and so we generally have a lot of packets of about a pound, pound and a half of ground beef. So that's what we're using today. Ideally, whenever you cook meat, you want it to be at room temperature. So you have it out for about a half an hour or 40 minutes beforehand to just let it come up to that temperature. So we're going to put the meat in, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start to break it apart so that more of it can be touching the surface of the cast iron so it can start to cook. And I have the heat on medium, and I'm going to let it start to cook, and then I'll start to add in the seasonings that we'll talk about. Okay. Right, and so now I'm just going to let it sit for a bit, and we're going to go through some of the more varied steps to the shepherd's pie. So I have a pot, and what I'm going to be doing, on top of the meat layer in the pie plate, we're going to be putting mixed vegetables. And there's lots of ways you can do it. You can use fresh veggies that you cut, diced or rough chopped. But the easiest is to do frozen vegetables. And you can get all kinds of mixtures. Sometimes at home I'll do the carrots and peas and green beans and corn. But if you're trying to do an autoimmune paleo protocol, then you just make sure you're leaving out the corn. So today we have a mixture of a bag of peas and shredded carrots, and then like a half a bag of frozen green beans. So we're going to put that in the pot. And to give it a little bit more flavor, instead of boiling it just in water, we're actually going to boil it in some chicken broth. And you can certainly use your own homemade broth, but again, to make it a little bit easier, we're just going to take a quart of store-bought organic chicken broth, and make sure there's no sugar added, particularly if you're really trying to stick to that paleo diet and avoid any kind of refined sugar, which can be really inflammatory. So we're going to stir the meat a little bit more because it's starting to brown, and we want to get the ground beef to really resemble cooked ground beef with the onions. So we're going to move it around and break it apart a little bit. And while that's cooking, we're going to take our vegetables and broth, and we're going to cover the pot, and we're going to put it on boil on high heat so that we can boil steam the veggies. So we're going to go and light it, and we're going to put it on high, and then we're going to stir the meat a little bit more. Now, when the vegetables are done, we're going to drain the broth, and we're going to season the veggies some more, because otherwise they would be a little bland in flavor even though they weren't cooked in the broth. So what we're going to do, the next step, on top you have the meat and the onion layer, you have the vegetable layer that we're going to season after it's boiled, and then you have the potato layer. Now, I typically like to use sweet potatoes, and there's such a wide variety of sweet potatoes. There's Japanese yams that are more white inside. There's all different types of orange-colored sweet potatoes in different varieties and flavors. This is two different types of sweet potatoes that are orange inside, one that's a little bit sweeter and one that's a little bit milder. But what I've done before this, to save some time, is I actually peeled and chopped the sweet potato into large cubes, and I boiled it in water to get them to become very soft. And I boiled it longer than I normally would to really get them fork tender, because we're going to mash them. So I drained the water, and I now just have a big bowl of the sweet potatoes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some salt, because that's definitely going to give it more flavor. It's about a teaspoon of salt. And then I'm going to add a little bit of oil, about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Okay. And then I'm just going to mash it. And there's lots of ways to mash, but I'm going to use a potato masher. And we're just going to mash the sweet potato because we really want it to get into that smooth consistency. And that way it's going to be easier to put on top of the shepherd's pie. And you'll notice when we do that step of layering the actual shepherd's pie, we're going to use a spatula, and it's almost like we're going to paint it on, because we want to use it as a barrier to seal all the juices in. And you can take a break and stir the meat, which is just looking wonderful, and it's about halfway brown. And the vegetables that I'm using, because they were frozen, they were pre-cooked. So they're not going to take very long, but we'll let them sit in the broth and boil for a little bit longer so that they can also get a little bit more flavor from the broth. And the meat, we're just going to keep stirring until it gets fully cooked. Okay. And we'll go back to our mashing. So there's different varieties. You could do white potato, you could do mixed potatoes. It all depends on what flavor profile you're going for. But I love sweet potatoes because they're definitely a little lower glycemic, which means that they're lower sugar. And so when we eat them, our blood sugar doesn't spike as much as it does with white potatoes. And those of you, of course, that are on an autoimmune paleo diet, the white potatoes are considered nightshades, and so typically you're trying to avoid them. So I'm going to take the potato masher out of here and just now go with a spoon. And if you find that it's just not thick enough, you can add a little bit more olive oil. You can also add a little bit of milk substitute, like coconut milk, if you want to give it a little bit more of a creamy texture. I typically like to stay with just the salt and the olive oil because it gives it a nice basic flavor that's just so delicious. And there's so many other flavors in the shepherd's pie layers that I find that leaving the sweet potato sort of more pure makes it really delicious. So the meat is continuing to cook, and I can hear the broth boiling. And the vegetables are cooking. In a little bit, I'm going to drain the vegetables so we can season them. And then by then, the meat should be done, and we can layer them in the pie plate. So, all right. This is looking fantastic. And I'm going to take a little bit of a taste test to make sure it's the right flavor. So delicious. I love mashed sweet potatoes. So we're going to set that aside for now. I'm going to stir the meat just a little bit more. Now I'm actually going to add the seasoning to the meat that I haven't done yet. So I'm going to put about 3/4 of a teaspoon of sea salt. And we're going to do about 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of cracked pepper. And then I'm going to do about a teaspoon of whole cumin seeds, or even 1/2 teaspoon, to give it a little bit of flavor. And about 1/2 to a whole teaspoon of celery seeds, whole celery seeds. They are delicious. A little bit of that pickle flavor that we find because they're so often used in making pickles. And then oregano. And oregano is such a wonderfully fragrant spice. We're going to do about 1.5 teaspoons. It can vary. Okay. And then we're going to mix it up. And this cast iron gets a little hot when you're cooking it on a gas stove, particularly the handle. So you just want to make sure that your hand is protected. So we're just cooking this down. There's still some parts that are still pink, and when you're cooking ground beef, you really want to get it fully cooked. And so we're just breaking it apart so they're into smaller pieces. And now we're going to check the broth. Okay, so move things out of the way a little bit. And let's check the vegetables, and they are looking wonderful. So we're going to turn off the vegetables, and what we're going to do is drain the juice. And what I generally do is I just take the lid and I take it maybe like 1/2 inch away from the edge of the pot, and I just drain it in the sink. So we're going to do that right now. And that just makes it easier. I don't have to grab a colander. And also then I can season it right in the pot. And the fact that the pot is hot helps to incorporate the seasoning a little bit more. And there we go. Okay. So now there's a lot of different ways you can season this, but certainly the first thing to do is start with salt. Even if the broth was a salted broth and not a low sodium one, you still want to add another 3/4 teaspoon or so of salt, or otherwise it's going to taste a little bland. You can put in some cracked pepper. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll add in paprika because it gives it a little bit of a smoky flavor, but if you're doing the autoimmune paleo diet, you want to leave it out because it is considered a nightshade. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a tablespoon of lemon juice to give it a little bit of flavor. And then I'll tell you my secret ingredient here that I found gives it a nice little bit of a tart flavor. Is I add in a tablespoon of pickle juice. And these are pickles that I made from scratch. And they're really wonderful. And so we're just going to take a tablespoon, a little bit of whole mustard seeds that goes in with it. And now we're just going to stir. And then we're going to taste test and make sure that it's salted enough. And I'm going to show are really soft and cooked down. Now, of course, they started off as frozen, so they were really easy to cook. We're just going to do a little bit more breaking up of the ground beef. And it's really almost cooked, which is fantastic because we're getting to the end of this step so that we can start to layer the shepherd's pie. All right, this is wonderful. We're going to give it another few minutes. A couple of little pink spots that we're going to try to cook down. And it is smelling so fragrant with all the spices that we put in. So now we're going to taste test the vegetables. Let's give that a try. We've got the peas and the carrots and the green beans. They're so delicious. They're not too mushy yet because I took them out before they boiled for too long, but they're perfect flavor. They've got a little bit of tartness from the lemon juice and the pickle juice, a little bit of sweetness because of the peas and the carrots. You've got the saltiness, but not too strong because we've got all the different layers that we're salting, and it's perfect. So we're going to set that aside because that's the middle layer, and now we're going to take the cast iron and we're going to take it off the heat onto my cutting board here and just give it another stir. You can see how it's fully cooked. Everything's brown and the onions are mixed inside, and the onions stopped burning because when I added in the meat gave off a lot of liquid, which then almost sort of deglazed the pan. So this is just fabulous. And cast irons are so wonderful to be used for doing ground beef because it gives it a nice depth of flavor. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our pie plate, and this can be a lot of different things. It could be a deeper pie plate. It could be just a general one you make an apple pie in. It could be a large baking dish. If you're having a larger party over for dinner, you can double the recipe and get a big sort of lasagna baking dish and fill it up. The shape does not matter, it's just the concept of layering the flavors. So what we're going to do is we're first going to move the cast iron off here so I can put the cutting board in front of me, or rather the pie plate. And what we're going to do is we're going to put the first layer in, which is the beef. And ideally you want to use a slotted spoon because then you won't get a lot of the fat juices from the pan. So I'm just going to literally put a layer down on the bottom. This one's not a very deep dish pie plate, so it'll make maybe a smaller pie. And of course we can put it in as much as we need, the different layers. So we're going to put a little bit more here. And we have the nice onion and meat. It's such a delicious layer here. And I can smell the cumin seeds and the celery seeds and the oregano. It's such a wonderful flavor. All right, so we've got our meat here. And I'm just going to move this cast iron out of the way. And then I'm going to take my slotted spoon, and I'm just going to rinse it. And I'm going to use the slotted spoon again, but now for the vegetable layer. So you can see you've got a nice layer of meat with the onions and all the seasoning. And then we have our pot here with all of the vegetables. So we're going to put a layer of that in. And again, I'm using a slotted spoon because I used some of the lemon juice and the pickle juice, and there's a little bit left over of the broth. And so I just don't want to take in too much of the fluid because these are going to continue to cook in the oven. And I'm just going to put the layering in over. I'm just really covering up the meat, which I'll show you in a moment. And it's fun when you eat this because it's like the perfect bite. You get a little bit of all the flavors. I'm just going to flatten this out. And you can see this beautifully rich colored layer of the peas and the green beans and the carrots. And now for the last layer, we're going to do the sweet potatoes. So they've been sitting here for a little bit, so let's make sure they're still soft. And if not, you can always put in some more olive oil, but it's still wonderfully mushy. Smushable, I think is what I put in the recipe. And so what we're going to use is a spatula to try and spread it on. But we're going to kind of clump big bits of it first in different sections. Now, certainly you might get a little bit of the veggies that end up coming through, but just do your best to seal in the flavor. And I filled this pie plate up quite a bit with the vegetables and the meat, but it just means it's going to be a little bit more dome shaped, and that's fine. We've got enough sweet potato. I would err on the side of judgment and maybe make some extra sweet potato. And even if you don't need it all, then you'll have some mashed sweet potato for another meal or snack, or you can make potato pancakes. There's lots of things you can do with mashed sweet potatoes. And we're just gonna keep going. And this is looking so beautiful. And it's so wonderful to smell. It's really fragrant with all the different seasonings that are coming through. The oregano and cumin, that tartness from the lemon juice and the pickle juice I can smell. And I'm really just sealing it in, so that way it's sort of a barrier for the moisture. And let's see here. And there we go. You can see how I've really kind of painted on the sweet potato. This is kind of like an art project. You can see that I've really tried to seal in so that there's no holes. We're going to move that out of the way. And you can see this beautiful shepherd's pie that's ready to go into the oven. So before we started this, I preheated the oven to 350 degrees. And what I generally like to do is I cover this with tin foil and I cook it in the oven for about a half an hour covered. And then I take the tin foil off and I cook it for another 15 to 20 minutes without the cover so that the top can get a little bit more dried and less wet. Let me grab the tin foil cover that I borrowed from the computer. Sorry about that. And here we go. So we're going to just put it right over. And I just took 2 pieces of tin foil and just covered it up. And we're going to put it in the oven in the middle rack at 350 degrees. And we're going to cook it for about a half an hour covered and then 15 to 20 minutes uncovered. So in essence of time, so that you don't have to sit here and wait, I made one beforehand. So we are going to get the taste test that one now. So let's see. We take this beautiful shepherd's pie, and you can see this one. The difference with this one is it has a little bit of corn niblets in it. But again, if you're trying to do the autoimmune paleo lifestyle, then you want to avoid the corn because it is considered a no food. So we've got our plate, and a fork and our knife, and I have a pie cutter, but really you can use lots of things to cut this. And we're just going to go through all of the layers. And then we're just going to put this right on my plate. And it doesn't necessarily stay together, so we're going to get the pieces that we left behind in the pie plate. There we go. Okay. And give this a try. And then we're going to do the perfect bites. We got to take a little bit of the sweet potato, a little bit of the ground beef, and a little bit of the vegetables. And that's going to be our mouthful. So delicious. You can taste all the different layers of flavor, which is what makes this dish so special, honestly. You could just put the beef and the onions and some salt together and some sweet potatoes and some veggies and not do anything too doctored up, and it would still be really wonderful because of the different textures. But when you add the different layering of flavors to the different parts of the dish, together it makes this just wonderful flavor in your mouth and such a fun textural experience because you have the sweet potatoes, which are so soft and mushy and nourishing, and all the different vegetables that are slightly crunchy and slightly soft, and then the meat, which is just so delicious with the cumin and oregano. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're totally not intimidated and you will go and make shepherd's pie, because it really is a very simple process. It just means there's a bunch of pots that you have to clean afterwards. And I have been known to clean as I go, or once I'm done with the sweet potatoes, I'll drain them and then use that pot to do the veggies in. There's lots of ways to shorten time, but it's worth it. And it's a wonderful dish, and it's a one-pot meal in the sense that you have one thing to put on the table, and it's delicious. So I hope you try it, and stay tuned for the next episode of Simply Paleo. And as always, I'd love to hear from you. If you have any wish lists of foods you'd love to have support in figuring out how to substitute so it's paleo friendly, or any wish lists in general of things you'd like me to demonstrate, please visit my website at simplypaleo.com. Thanks so much.